Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. So we are just starting a session describing some things we do, and really hopefully this will be interesting and helpful for someone. So I'll pass the word to Dennis, our front-end experts. He will describe about some things we do on some of our projects. Dennis?
Yes, thanks, Igor. So let's start from probably the main theme of the current presentation session. We'll talk about the Micro Frontends, and we'll talk about our small cases, about our successful cases, about our not very successful cases, but with probably the part implementation of the current technology. And we will also talk about how to use Micro Frontends and probably not to use them based or regarding to your business needs, or based on or just understand even Micro Frontends from the business perspective. So probably let's start from the first slide and let's actually understand what is Micro Frontend. I will explain it in not a very formal way. Let's talk about Micro Frontend like about ducks. And ducks like to swim in pond, and that's why let's use the small terminology dictionary, and let's call the Micro Frontend as the micro duck. So let's imagine that you have an application and you need to split some functionality to some small parts, because it's become very large and it's hard to expand the application and hard to build the new features. And you want to, for example, use more than one team, or just try to for some way to distinct the work, or just start split the work for a few teams. And based on this case, we have one pond, you need to implement a few new features, or just split this one, and you can use something that we can call the Micro Frontend. We will explain like the step-by-step what is actually the micro duck mean and how we can use it. For example, let's start from the team splitting. From the first view, you can see that you have a very huge monolith duck. It means you have a great application with a lot of functionality inside, and you need to split this functionality, and not just split, you need to split not only the code, you need to split tasks by the team. And that's why you can use, for example, we will talk about the three mainstream frameworks or libraries that nowadays are very popular. And that's why almost always we will use the three items: the three team, the three ducks, or something like that. Based on this screen, you can see that you can split one duck for three herd team. And that means that every herd team will herd each duck. And if you want to ask something about the functionality or something about the new feature, you can ask just one small team, and it's much faster and much you have a lot of win-win situation when you can not hold or just ask a team with 30 members plus or something like that. Just a small team, just one monolith duck that can be split by the some count of team. And that's probably the not very usual case how to explain the Micro Frontend. So let's see the very base table, and there's something like the comprehension table of how actually looks the micro service and Micro Frontend. Based on probably the most not well-known cases, like the word microservice mostly, because Micro Frontend is something new. And this how we can explain what actually and how we can use those stuff with each other. For example, all those micro stuff start from the website or the application, and the first step of the splitting very big application is to start splitting and use the front-end team and the back-end team and the DevOps team. And the next step of the splitting teams is to start split the back-end to the microservices. This means that you will have for example, the three backend teams, and we have like the one step that wasn't split. That was the front end. Actually, the first three steps were the basic steps that probably used from all over the world. Start with the Netflix, because when they showed their presentation about the microservices, all the world start using them. But the next, probably something like the next generation of the splitting is the Micro Frontends. That means you can have microservices, you can have Micro Frontends, you can have the front end team, the back end team, and they will work with each other. I mean, like, it will not break anything. It will not break the current state of your project, even when you're on any of this stage. For example, when you have on the website, when you have the front end team and the backend team, it will not break anything when you start using the Micro Frontend in your application now. But we will talk about which cases will be useful for start using Micro Frontends, or in which cases it's not the best decision to start using them. Okay, so the core idea from the beginning is to split your front-end team into, for example, the three small teams. And also, if we are talking about the splitting, you will understand that one team can hurt one micro doc. This means if you will have, for example, the three frameworks of three libraries, doesn't matter actually what you use, you will have the very determined team and determined dogs that it will hurt. It's just keeping in mind that it's probably one of the best solutions when you can hold only one team, one framework, and not to use like the mixed teams, or just trying to teach your front enders, for example, to a lot of frameworks and a lot of stuff. It's something that you can probably know from the microservices when, for example, the Python team have their own Python microservice. That's probably the same cases are using here, but the main, like what actually the difference, front end is about using the JavaScript. So it's not a similar one as the microservice, because you can use a lot of languages there, but based on the Micro Frontend, from like in mostly cases, you can just know the JavaScript, and it's like it's mean why the docs are very similar, because they use JavaScript inside, and those docs are built from the JavaScript. That's actually why it's using like that. And when we're talking about your app doc, your project, you can understand that sometimes your doc become bigger. It can include some frameworks inside, not just only one, and you want to split it. It's something like the Megazord. Yeah, probably your application can be anything that you can just imagine. But when we are talking about the pros and cons of your project, let's start from the cons, why you can use Micro Frontend, and let's probably start from the most important cases to something like with cases that are not so important. And the first one is the technologies variety. That means you can use not only one framework, not only one library inside. I mean, like you can use the Vue.js, you can use the AngularJS, I mean the Angular version 2+, and you can use also the React.js. That means you can split your project, and every part of your application can be, or every page of your application can be another framework. It's useful because you can, you're not dependent on only one sort of developers. You can use all of the front-end devs who know probably only one technology, and you can start split your application based on your size of the teams, probably if you have some very important modules there, you can split or start splitting with the most important modules based on the technologies that is the most, that you have the expertise the most in this technology. That's why it's a great process, because you can use a lot of technology, and your project will work, because every Micro Frontend in some is something that is just the code base, and you can like you can archive your project, let's call this case, in some in some structure, and you can use the structure in like just the simple JS code. So every this micro frontend, it's just the JS code that you can include in your project, and it will work properly. I mean, it doesn't matter which technology was used to build this micro frontend. It will be useful to implement in every place in your current application, for example, an existing one, or when you start your own. And the second process is the parallel development. This means that yours, for example, the three teams can work in parallel with three features, and those three teams can use a technology, for example, the technologies like the React, like the Vue.js or Angular, and they are mostly independent. It's mean when the processes are built in the right way. I mean, like when those applications are separated or those modules are separated, your whole application will be independent inside. I mean, each module and each team will only have its own doc. This means the React team will not need to wait, for example, the Vue team. The Vue team will not wait for the Angular team, or they will not, or not any of them will not wait for any team from another team. And that's like it's very useful to use it, but you can see this the microdoc 3 is duplicated. This means that any doc can be supported by any team, but with the small features, because because we need to remember that each doc will be a JavaScript, and if your team know the Vue.js, the Angular, or React.js, they will know the JavaScript, and that's why you can actually sometimes have little support from another team, but only like with the small features. That's not a very common case, but when sometimes something can happen, it also can be included in our imagine about how we can support the micro frontends. And probably the one of the most important there stuff is it's about the multi-use. What actually this mean? So if in some cases you have not only one application, but some code inside the one application is very needful in another application, you can build some modules as the micro frontend. What actually this mean? When you have the three application and some modules can repeat it, or even some application can be built from existing modules. It's mean like if you have the one very legacy project and very big project, and you want to build smaller projects, you can build a new project in or just some modules from the old project and build them as the micro frontends, and then you can use those small modules in another or in your another application. And it's when you're talking about the most common case. When you start build your own application, for example, from the scratch, you can start build your application in a way when you can use already existing parts for building like something new or extend your project, or just build projects step by step from the version 1 to version 3, for example. And that's why the microdocs can help you. It's when you start build your application or start split your application in a way when you can reuse already existing code and build something new. But it's only but like there's only one restriction. You need to understand that it should be planned before you start building the micro frontend to be able to use them in this way. Let's start to the second probably module with about the cons, and we will talk about the pros, but like from another point of view. The first one, okay, that's cool to have a lot of technologies, but the problem here is when you will start use something old, or when your team, your dedicated team just know the one old framework, the problem will be that you will start using another frameworks. You will have a lot of just the bench of frameworks, almost like in microservices, when people will probably or just should know something old, or you will have a lot of technologies inside your project until it will it will influence that very bad, because you will need to always find new employees or find new developers, or just all or not all developers, but already existing team should need to learn something new. But in the worst, probably in worst case, this technology will just disappear. So that's why you should always choose technology very wise, and your team or the architecture in your team should always remember that you need to use only this small count of technologies in your project, or you will have some problems or troubles with the extending the existing project, or just building something new based on technology that you're using in your micro frontend. That's very important, because that's probably the most similar case you have in microservices, and this problem is always exists. Even if it's not from the start, you will reach them in a few months, as years, or something like that. The next cons is about it's very cool to have the parallel development, but the problem is if, for example, something happened with one of the team, or there are some troubles, for example, in deploy process or something like that, it will be hard for each team to help another team. Even when code will become in JavaScript in any way, the problem is the Angular team probably do not understand how the React works, and Vue team probably do not understand how the Angular and React team works. And that's why if you will keep a small amount of technologies, it also like good to know that your team should be dedicated, and your team should always understand and know a little bit something about another team. This means when you start building your processes, it's always useful to share the knowledge from one team to another team, and not just keeping them in parallel, because it's very fast to develop. That's like some case when your team start growing, when your project are growing up, and you will receive some problem like this when the processes are not correct, because processes are also very important for the business side, and it's also very important for the development side when we are talking about the development of the micro frontends, and probably it's almost very similar cases you can reach in microservices. So it's very cool to have a parallel development, but you also need to understand that that's very human dependent, when one team should know something about all the project, or about what actually the another team are doing on this project. It will save the resources, and also it will makes your project more much stronger in case of development something new or fixing bugs very fast. Okay, and the third cons is about multi-use. The problem here is it's very cool that you can build application using all docs. I mean, like, but the problem starts when you will have one doc and it will be ill, or your doc will just disappear, or something will happen, and all the projects that are using this microdoc, they will disappear. I mean, like this, they will have some problems. I mean, disappear is something when you just see the white screen and your application is broken. That's something that I mean, in definition of disappear. And the problem here is when you are very dependent on a very great amount of micro frontends, microdoc, you will always need to understand that it's very you need to be very wise when you start building a lot of micro frontends, and when your team start building a lot of micro frontends, it's very helpful to understand how many are micro frontends there, or how many they plan to use micro frontends, and how many applications can be built from those micro frontends, because every using of micro frontends in a lot of application also have probably a great possibility to be broken because of one microdoc there. That's what we can, that's basically what my team was met, and that is very important case here. Okay, and actually, when we are talking about the constant process, it's also useful to make some or just show you some examples of the implementation of Micro Frontends in our project. And before that, we will try to understand the common cases, or probably the unified cases when you probably can start or should use the Micro Frontends based on your perspectives. Okay, so the first one is the split complex application. If, for example, if you have your big application, your big doc, it's includes a lot of modules inside, for example, like the reporting module, the some user modules and something like that, or we can also call the module as a page. You can start split your project into smaller projects, and those projects will be a separated module, but it will be also the micro doc or micro front end. It's useful to do it when project is on development process or just in development, and you can start split them, but only when your modules are not very dependent on each other. I mean, like if those modules can work in separate way, or you can use the data flow in a very correct way, when data flow can be reached out from every micro docs that you will plan to build. You can split your huge application to the smaller one, and it will help you to develop faster, and all your modules can be reused in new project. And we will also have something that we can call versions. I mean, like each model inside this doc can be a versionated module, and you can use the module strategy of the development of the front end, almost like we have used before in the microservices. Okay, and the other stuff is when you build not only one application, you sometimes can use something that probably was built in another application, but you cannot reuse it because, for example, your current application built in Vue.js, and the previous one was built in Angular.js. And the problem here is you cannot just copy and paste your previously coded code, because it will just not work, because those applications cannot be friends in a very simple way. So the Micro Frontends are actually help here, because you can build your application as a Micro Frontend, and this Micro Frontend can be used in another application or in another pond if you are talking about the micro doc. Because, for example, based on this screen, you can see the green model doc3 and the green model doc3 in another pond. This means you can use already existing code in another application, and based on the fact that Micro Frontend is only the JS file in the end of the day, it will just be something like the remote entry.js. You will be able to use this code in another project, and it's very simple to reuse. It's sometimes hard to build, but it's very easy to use in other applications. But it's based on fact when you are having this similar application, or probably you want to split a huge application into a smaller one, or in cases when you just want to reuse something in 2 or more applications. That's very useful based on those cases. And if that's what we'll talk about in case of the building new features. The case when you are replacing the old code from the new code, and you don't want to break your application or just freeze the development of the old stuff, because old stuff actually is working, and the old stuff is your business. And that's why you can start split the old code base to the new code base using the Micro Frontends. What actually this mean? You can leave some old code inside your application, but you can use the Micro Frontend as a new part with a new framework, new library, and just build it inside your old application. It can be based on, like, for example, nowadays we can build the framework from the 2010, and we are using the technology from the 2022. So you can build a new code inside the very old project, and it will actually it's real. And this case show you how to save, for example, the 50% of your old code, not delete all the application or just not starting from the scratch to build something new, but just step by step replacing the old code with the new code base. And this something that is very useful to do, and it's something that something why you can choose the Micro Frontends. But there is also the other side of the medal, and that's the cases where you probably do not need to use the Micro Frontends. And the most popular case is very simple, but it's I've seen a lot of discussions in this way when you're talking about the Micro Frontends only the mainstream. I mean, every year we have a new technology, we have the new framework, the new library. And the problem here is developers always want to use something new because the communities start talking about it, and you can make your project faster, the new technologies, the new features, the new experience, and something like that. But sometimes new technology is just the mainstream. I mean, like this cool duck is only a cool duck that I was drawn few days ago, or probably the few weeks. It doesn't mean anything more that's on except only being a duck. And that's probably can be applied in the case when we are talking about the Micro Frontends. If you do not, if your team cannot explain why it's useful to use the Micro Frontend here, it's probably you don't need to use it because your project is, for example, hard to extend. That there is no any proposals to use a Micro Frontend because it will take its time. It's sometimes very hard to start with them or extend using the Micro Frontends or even build the Micro Frontends. So the first one thing that probably you can exclude from nowadays, I mean, in 2022, it just check the mainstream, because sometimes you can use the Micro Frontend because only because of the mainstream. The second one is when we are talking about the start project from the scratch. Sometimes we have two very common situations, and this situation can be in most of cases. For example, when you want to, when you have a small team, for example, the 3 developers or 4 developers, the problem here is you will not be able to split the work correct. I mean, like using the schema when one developer support one Micro Frontend and use the one technology is probably not the best one. So when you have a small team, it's also something like the bell ring, but you should not use the Micro Frontend here because your team will not be able to support it Micro Frontend. As we saw before, when the only one man will support only, or one developer just or one guy who can write code will support only one Micro Frontend or only one library, it will be a problem when something will happen or your employee will be fired, something like that, and this team will not be able to support a huge amount of code. And or just when there are only few developers, it will work in the same case. It's probably better to have like there's not a small amount of teams or not a small amount of developers inside the team, because in the not very happy cases, you'll have the problem with the supporting and the problem with the extending current project. And the second one is when you're talking about something like the startups or the MVPs or POCs of your projects. The problem here is it will take its time. Micro Frontends is hard to build, and Micro Frontends is it should be planned very well to start with the Micro Frontends, as probably in most cases when you're talking about the startups, the POCs or the MVPs, we need to build it fast. We need to build without any risks or with the small risks, and we don't need to be disturbed by the question, actually, will we reach the deadline or will we just drop it and it will not be useful in the right time. And probably the last but not least problem is when you start using Micro Frontends in not in not correct way. It's mean when you have one technology, it's probably will not be able to use micro frontend inside this technology. For example, this is very simple example of the technology. When you want to bring up AngularJS inside the React.js, you will not be able to do this because Angular is the HTML first framework, and you will not be able to use it in correct way in the AngularJS. Probably you can make some functionality, you can build some wrappers, or just spend a lot of time to be able to use this technology inside another technology, but probably you need to understand that it will not work there. And it can, in this case, can be also used in another pair of frameworks or libraries. And it's very useful to understand where you want to implement the micro frontend, and actually is it actually may happen there, because not all the technologies can be friends with another technologies. You can put some things that are actually not suitable with another stuff. Okay, and let's talk about the successful story of the implementation of the micro frontends. The first one, probably, or our example, will start from the case when you have one old project. In my case, it was the project that already 8 years old, and it's in development phase. It's always need new features. The problem here, but the problems, this project always or just used a very old framework inside, and the problem for building new features is new technologies they are not suitable with the client's wants, and that's why we are use the micro frontend inside the old project. And actually do something like that. When you have a very Sky-Fi doc, and you need Sky-Fi doc is something like the new feature, and you need to implement this feature, but using the technologies that call the technologies that call the micro frontend. And just for being in context, we are talking about the micro frontend using the Webpack model federation. In this case, it's something like from the technical part. But when we are talking about the business part, when we needed to build something new using the another technology, because the previously dedicated team used a very old technology, and we need to somehow implement the new code inside the old database or code base. And that's why we are putting the new features in separated micro docs, the micro frontends, and our application looking now something like this. The old application has its own features, and some features from the old application we are using in new applications that actually the smaller versions, or probably the limited versions of our current application. So when you have something that use licenses, for example, you can build smaller features with the separated licenses, and using the micro frontends as a decision when already existing code can be included in another project that can use a part of your current application, or you can build the couple of application based on the already existing code. So in our case, we have built new project based on idea when old code will not be rewritten, and the new features will come in new project, and new features will be a part of the old project. So when I develop at once, but I can use this code in other applications. And this case is working now. We actively work with this case. We continue to deliver the new features from the new project and for the old project, as the micro frontends and all the code are into production. Okay, but when it's not the best solution to use the micro frontends based into facts, you're using the Webpack model federation, and you're building code from the old project to the new project, or just start building the new project based on micro frontend architecture. The first stuff is about it's not very easy to rewrite a huge project to a smaller project and to use the micro frontends as a tool, because sometimes your project can be very huge, and it's very hard to split your project in the correct way. And the problems here we will see in the next slide. Based on this slide, I want to see that sometimes you can build your application can be so huge, and you need to use, for example, the 40 micro-frontends to be able to build the copy of your current application in the same functionality and with the same data workflows. So if your project is very big, probably it will be not the best solution to split it to the micro-frontend. Probably it's much better to start something new or start thinking about the micro-frontend, not about a very small application, or even it's much better to start building the separated applications based on your functionality. For example, the 40 micro-frontends, it will be a very painful stuff to build, a very painful stuff to track, and very painful stuff to find what actually was broken and in what micro-frontends. And also, it's when you're talking about the not a very big teams, because in a big team, I probably do not recommend you to use micro-frontends now. This technology is new, and this technology is probably not have all the cases that you have met on the microservices, and probably not all the cases are already resolved, or there are not a lot of examples of how to resolve each problems there. So if we continue to talking about the problems, the problem is the high level of dependency between modules. I mean, like if you have a very huge application and you want to split this application to a micro-frontends, probably your modules are very dependent on each other. It's mean it's very hard to use micro-frontend as a micro-frontend, because it must be independent unit, and that can use any information from your backend or any information from another system, and it shouldn't depend from another micro-frontend, or two micro-frontends shouldn't copy paste some components or some UI part or some JS part. So sometimes, or probably very often even, you can see that a lot of code are just copy paste from one service to another service, or from one application to another application. In this case, when your application is not very modulable, or your application is a very was built in very monolithic way, you will spend a lot of time and a lot of resources to build your application as the micro-frontend application, and because your doc is very dependent on another docs, let's call it in this case, and this problem is already existing in the microservices, and based on this case, the problem is microservices are like the something old and something that, I mean, old, something mature, and there are a lot of answers about the using of technologies. The micro-frontends is something that new, is something fresh, is something cool, but only when some restrictions are there. And sometimes it's also easy to extend your current project, but it's very hard to rewrite it. I mean, based on previous slide, you can see that it's hard to split your application, and probably you do not need to split. You need to start implement new features with the micro-frontends or with the splitted features, and in micro-frontend way. This means let's hold this big doc in this pond, but let's build another functionality as a small doc that will be always included in this application. And even in this case, you will be able to reuse micro-frontends in other applications, or just start to rethinking some part of your old doc and build a new micro docs under the micro-frontends there. So probably I will not recommend you to extend your great application with the micro-frontends in mostly cases, but when it's hard to split, probably it's much better to start extend your or build a new functionality with the micro-frontends. It will be much helpful, and you will spend less amount of time to extend, but not to build something new, or just to start to resync the big application and split it to the micro-frontends. But if we are talking about, we have talked about a lot of stuff there. We have talked a lot of cases, but there is probably the one great truth, the one great truth about the micro frontends. It's always good in a good hands. I mean, like if your team will be will like make some researches when your team, your development team, the business team, probably all the stuff that you can include in the delivery process are thought that it's time to change or extend your code with the micro frontends. It will help you, and it will rise the speed of development. It will also save a lot of resources there, because it's very hard to put team in a very old project and try to understand how it works, how a lot of modules work with each other, how the old code works, all old frameworks, and actually all this hell can be avoided by just start building something new with the new code, or just when it's already built into micro frontends. It's much easier for developers to understand only a piece of code or just a module of code, instead of you start like digging in a very old application or in a very huge application. And that's why it's always good decision, but only when you know what you are doing. And all the previous information can just help you to understand and check, is it useful, or will it be useful in your current state of things. And thanks. Probably any questions?
Dennis, there are a couple of questions there in the chat. I'll read them. So, Dennis, can you share some examples of complex apps that would be suitable for this approach?
Sorry, this probably not very loud. Could you please repeat the question?
Can you share some examples of a complex applications that would be suitable for this approach?
For sure, I can actually like share you the abstract application, because I cannot just use my current project as the example. In my case, we have the very old system, and this system have a lot of modules inside. For example, let's probably use the very common as the model as let's probably have a lot of system as the report. And when you want to build a very fast and very useful report system, you probably do not need to use the framework that is actually 10 years old. It's very useful to start implementing a very important model in new technology and in less separated micro frontend. So when we are talking about something real, we can use, for example, the Atlassian Jira, and some of their projects can or just start using or already use the micro frontends inside, because they need to build something new with the new separated teams, with the separated technologies. And it's something that we can talk as an example. If you are talking about something abstract, it's we have built a new functionality in our project using the micro frontend, because we just needed to build new model and use new model inside the new project and inside the old project. So that's probably the few examples that you can use if you're talking about something abstract. Is there any questions, or it was the first one?
Yes, so the question was from Kerry Thompson. Hopefully this answers this. Another question was also from Kerry Thompson. Does it mean that such an approach can increase costs because of scalability issues or organization problems?
Yeah, it can work in two ways, because from the first side, it will increase the cost. I mean, like, if you will not build the processes inside the teams correct, it can probably bring you problems or bring you great success. So that is probably the cost of this is you don't know how it will works in your team or in your project. Probably the best answer here will be you should analyze all the problems there, and then you will need to, you will understand the cost of using the Micro Frontends, or just trying to build something new or something old with the POCs, and only after POCs will be done and they will be ended very resultingly, you will be able to try and use the Micro Frontends. Only after those experiments you will understand what is the cost and how it will influence in your projects. That's probably it.
Good. Thank you very much for joining. Hope this was interesting or helpful for anyone. If you have any other questions related to this, you can also always ask afterwards. Just write us an email. We'll be happy to answer. Thank you very much.
Yes, thanks a lot.